Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. I'm going to say something that sounds wild. Using a magic wand every day might actually support your health. I tested it. I did a 21-day masturbation protocol. Yes, protocol, where I tracked stress, sleep, mood, confidence, even how connected I felt to my partner. The results were so striking that we scaled it up into a legit scientific study with over 1,000 people with vulvas. And here's a spoiler. The benefits went way beyond, quote, I had great orgasms. We're talking emotional well-being, body confidence, relationship connectivity, and a lot more. You can read the actual findings yourself. Head to magicwandstudy.com and see how pleasure is showing up as wellness. Black Friday deals are here, and it's time to invest in something that gives you the pleasure you deserve. As a sex educator, I look for body-safe materials, smart design, and toys people actually keep reaching for. For over 20 years, Lelo has been redefining luxury pleasure, making toys that are so beautifully designed, they belong on your nightstand and your vision board. The Sona 3 Cruise is one of their icons, and it's designed for the kind of deep, all-encompassing pleasure that you want, and gives you the smoothest path to a fuller, deeper, and more intense orgasm. Go to lelo.com for their amazing Black Friday deals all month long. And use my stackable code SEXEDWITHDB for an additional 15% off. Hello, and welcome back to Sex Ed with DB. I am DB, your favorite sex educator and pleasure expert, and I cannot wait to dive into this conversation about disability and pleasure with our amazing guest, Andrew Gurza. Andrew is an award-winning disability awareness consultant and author of the book Notes from a Queer Cripple: How to Cultivate Queer Disabled Joy and Be Hot While Doing It. They identify proudly as severely disabled, and they've brought their advocacy work to the award-winning National Film Board of Canada documentary Picture This, Dan Savage's Savage Love podcast, and the 2022 Queer as Folk reboot. In this conversation, we're talking all about disability and sex because, yes, disabled people want to and do have sex. Like Andrew says, they want to be desired, they want to experience pleasure, and it shouldn't have to be such a struggle to get people to acknowledge that, let alone get disabled folks the care they actually deserve. Let's dive into this incredible conversation with the brilliant Andrew Gurza. Andrew Gurza is with us today. How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fantastic. I am absolutely thrilled to have you on the show. You've already been such a delight, even in pre-production. So I'm really excited where this is going to go.
Such a pleasure. I love doing it. I love doing this with like other podcasters because they know what's up, and it's really good.
It is the best. I'm so excited to have you here to talk about disability and pleasure and your book and all of the good stuff. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Hell yeah. Okay. We're going to dive right in. We're going to do the quick and dirty. Folks who listen to this podcast often know that this is our amazing rapid fire segment where we get to know our expert with some bold questions, honest answers, and just enough spice. We want a tiny bit of spice, kind of we're sprinkling it in before we get going here.
What kind of spice? Is it cumin? Because cumin has cum in it. So, I mean, that's...
That's really good. This is going to be good. I can already tell. Fantastic. Okay. I want to know from your perspective, what is one thing that most people don't know about disability activism?
They don't know, or they don't think about the fact that they will be a part of disability activism way sooner than they think they will be. So yes. Disability is the largest minority that you can become a part of at any time of your life, from accident, injury. You might also run into someone with a disability that you love or you want to fuck or you want to be with. Disability will come into your life in ways you weren't ready for. And that's what people don't think. They don't realize that like the activism we're doing as disabled activists is not just for us. Yes, it is primarily for us, but we're actually saying all the shit we're doing is actually for you too.
Because one day, like everyone, if they basically live long enough, they can easily get a disability.
Yeah, easily. Or like I was saying, you could run into the hottest disabled person in a coffee shop and be like, wow, that person's gonna, I want to get to know them. I want to date them. I want to fuck them. I want to be a part of their life. How do I do that? And then all of a sudden you're dating somebody with a disability, and disability is part of your experience. So like the whole idea that like our activism makes us somehow different from other activists, I feel really weird about that, because people say it all the time, and it's like, no, it's just activism. It just puts disability front and center. Like that shouldn't be. You should be thinking about it because it will be part of your life eventually.
Fuck yeah. And I love this framing of like, if you see someone hot who is disabled, I feel like people like of all disabilities can and are hot and can be
Yeah,
really good at sex and can be really funny, and like really normalizing disabled people's experiences when it comes to dating and sex and lust and love is critical.
all those things, and because we don't have, because disabled people are not seen in those lenses, we have so much trouble with social isolation, and like how do you hit on somebody appropriately and like comfortably where it's not, you know, inappropriate, because we're not given the chance to explore that. We go out in the world with all these misconceptions, doing it the way we think we're supposed to do it, but no one's taught us how to, you know, necessarily be appropriate, say it the right way, be kind, because we're never give people automatically assume we're not sexual beings. So it can be really tough to be out there sometimes trying when there's no handbook for how do you be disabled and like hit on somebody or flirt with somebody or like invite somebody back to your play. How do you do all that
Yes.
when there's no handbook for that when you're disabled?
100%. Yes, we are getting right into it, which I fucking love. What's one way that people without disabilities can help people with disabilities right now after they listen to this episode?
Um, Go on whatever social media you're on, whatever social media is still allowing people to post at this point. Who knows anymore?
Right.
Go on wherever you're on and look up hashtag disability and find one that speaks to you and watch that and learn from that. And if they talk about ableism, learn from that and think about like how does that affect you? Learn what that word means. Learn like how you have contributed to ableism in your day-to-day life. We all do it, myself included. We all have ableist ideas about the world because that's where we live in. And it takes guts to say, I want to unpack that within myself. So do that within yourself. Sit within yourself and be like, how have I contributed to this today? How can I not do that tomorrow? That's really simple.
Yeah, incredibly simple. Literally pause this episode, do what Andrew says. He is our teacher for the day, and go to your Instagram, do hashtag disability, and click on something that excites you. I'll wait until you do that. Go ahead, pause the episode, do it right now. Okay, now you're back. And I hope that you learned something. And if you did learn something exciting, we want to know about it. Email me at sexedwithdb@gmail.com, and I will let Andrew in on the enlightenment that you just
Yes,
had.
please. I want to know.
Okay. The last question for the quick and dirty before we get into our main interview is, what does nothing about us without us mean to you?
It means that everything you do for a disabled person rams.
They're using air quotes also. They're using air quotes.
Rams, curb cuts, like, you know, making sure that the workplace is accessible, elevators, all, like transit, everything you do for a disabled person has to include us. So you have to have disabled people on your boards. You have to have disabled people in positions of power. And when I was running a sex toy company, I don't anymore, but when I did that, I was the co-founder and the chief disability officer.
Love
So
it.
there was no other title like that in the world. We were the first to have a chief disability officer. And that was important because it showed that disabled people can be in positions of power, can be in positions of influence to make a change in the world that's important. And typically, when we see disabled people if we see disabled people in any kind of work situation, they're low level, they're entry level, they're, you know,
doing the grunt work that nobody else wants to do, when really they should be in the boardrooms helping to change the culture in the business, whatever you're doing. And so I struggle with when people say nothing about us without us, because there's so much without us. Like, are you doing anything about us or with us? Like, we're right here. And there's so many of us. Like, just with my disability, I have cerebral palsy, and there's 17 million people worldwide that have what I have.
Wow.
So it's not like we're a small group and we're all there. Most of us are underemployed. Most of us are underfunded in various ways. You know, we're talking about this during the U.S. shutdown. You know, I feel remiss if I didn't mention that, like, 42 million Americans, most of them with disabilities or racialized in some way, went, you know, without food security for most of this month, if
Jesus
not,
Christ.
You know, so we can't talk about disability without talking about how the government is fucking us right now, and they're not using any lube, and it's really, really like. And I'm in Canada, and I live in a very similar system. I get a certain stipend a month to live based on disability. If I didn't get that money, I couldn't feed myself. So I can't imagine what Americans with disabilities are feeling right now, where it's just been reinstated because, you know, our great president, and there's so much sarcasm there when I say that, the great president decided he would stop the shutdown, but it's fucking people over. And, like, you know, that's why I'm so lucky to talk about sex. But I think about those people who are like, how can you talk about your sexual pleasure when you can't fucking feed yourself?
Wow. That is incredibly real.
How can we get to a place where we can talk about disabled people fucking, which we should be able to get to, but how can you think about that when you're like, how am I going to feed myself today? How am I going to survive this today? And oh yeah, the government's trying to actively stop me from doing that? Great. Like, I found out this past week with SNAP that you're not allowed to get a hot meal with SNAP. So you can get a cold meal, but if you wanted to get like a hot meal that was pre-made for you, you're not allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what the fuck is that about? What? Like, what? Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a big tangent, but like,
no,
wow.
You're correct. I mean, so many things are coming up for me. I think with the SNAP thing, it's just so wild because a lot of people don't really connect like reproductive justice and reproductive rights with food insecurity, for example. But it really is all connected. Like when we're fighting for people to have basic rights and basic needs, we have to be fighting across the board for everything simultaneously. And when we're talking about food insecurity, of course, like you said, we're not going to be able to talk about things that bring us pleasure and complex dynamics of relationships when we're really just focused on getting our basic needs met. There's just there's no way.
Yeah. And it just it makes me really upset because, like, I am one missed support check away from being in that situation. And, like, that is really scary for so many people. And so I think about, most of my posts for years and years have been primarily about sexuality and disability, but I'm wanting to become more politically activated because I'm like, how can I talk about this when so many of my colleagues are like, I can't feed myself today. What do I do?
100%. Yeah. I remember we've had Steve Way on the podcast a few times. He's really great. And I remember my mind being blown the first time that he was on Sex Ed with DB because he was talking about the fact that essentially, if he gets married to somebody, he literally loses all of his Medicaid benefits.
Same in Canada. Exact same problem.
It is absurd. I cannot believe that.
If I move in with you, or if I want to date you, or if we're even roommates and you live with me, I become a dependent to you and you are required to make up whatever they take away. So I can't even move in with a roommate without losing my benefits, which speaks to where disabled people are already isolated, already lonely, already have trouble with socialization because of inaccessibility. So then you're saying, I'm not even allowed to fucking marry someone or date someone or do the things that everyone's supposed to do that is so common that no one thinks about. And it's like, wow. And that's why I struggle when I see queer creators, non-disabled queer creators posting like, oh yeah, we're so lucky to have marriage equality. And, you know, as we're recording this a few days ago, they just rejected the case to look at whether or not
Thank
gay
fucking
marriage
God.
should be rescinded, which is like great. But so I posted right after that. I was like, this is great, but also like disabled people have never had this.
Right.
We should probably also talk about that, like, because so much of disability intersects with queerness. There's so many queer disabled folks, and it's like, great, we still can't marry or date. Or I mean, you can date, and there are disabled folks who have the privilege to not have to worry about that. But those of us who live on benefits, it's such an archaic system. Like, how is that fair? And it's not just the US and Canada, it's all over the world. Australia, like, it's all over the world. And it's a shame that it's still that way in almost 2026.
Unbelievable. I mean, I definitely want to do an entire like mini episode explaining to people like what the current, at least in the US, like what the laws are that essentially prevent a disabled person from marrying, because then it leads to them losing their benefits.
And like, it's not a law that is like outright there that you see it. It's in your service agreement when you go get benefits, or it's in your Medicaid package.
Mhm.
It's like in fine print that if you don't look for that, you wouldn't understand. But if you know it's there, you're like, well, what the fuck is this?
Absolutely.
And so like, you know, it's so many of us have to hide relationships or not have relationships, and then they wonder why we're always angry and sad. Well, it's because maybe you wouldn't fucking let us date somebody or marry. Like, what?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you're really speaking truth to power here. I think that there's a lot that you're saying that hopefully really enrages us and makes us angry. And at the same time, I do want to also fight back by taking this next time to talk about pleasure and to talk about what that
Yeah.
looks like for queer disabled persons such as yourself. And so I'm curious to hear from you, like, when it came to your disability and when it comes to your disability activism, do you have kind of role models, inspiration, leaders in the space that you have looked up to?
Yeah, I mean, I look up to people like, I had the absolute privilege of talking to the now past Judy Heumann a couple years ago. She is, of course, the mother of disability rights, basically. And so I had the privilege of talking to her a couple years before she passed. And I just cold emailed her and said, there's probably no way you're going to look at this. You probably won't even see it. But just by chance, would you want to come on my podcast? And her team agreed. And I just about fell over.
Oh
And I
my
got to
God.
like talk with her for 45 minutes. And she said, all I can give you is 45 minutes. Is that fine? And I was like, Judy, if you want to give me 5 seconds, I'll take it. Like, whatever you got is good. And so and she's passed now, but I look up to people like her. I look up to people like Steve Way, people who are like putting it out there and saying this is what it is. And I also love the smaller creators who don't get as much reach as some of us do. I think about I can't think of any names specifically, but I think about like Black creators who are with disabilities who are doing the same things that we're doing. And I think about my privilege as a white disabled person to do what I do. And I wish that more disabled people of color had the chance to pop off on these spaces, not because, we all want internet fame, because for me, that's silly, but it's for them to be able to make a buck and move out of poverty. Like, that's why a lot of us are doing it, not necessarily because we want to be famous, whatever that means, but it's because like, oh, if I give myself a platform, maybe I can make enough money to feed myself this week, or to buy that phone that I need, or to buy that dildo that I want. But in this space, like, there are so few people still talking about sexuality and disability, so it's hard for me to think of like specific names in the space. I mean, I just look up to disabled folks who are just doing it, and regardless of what people think, regardless of their follower account, regardless of all these things that we like look up now as metrics of importance, which I think are so silly. Like, I'm so glad that people are doing it, regardless of if it reaches anybody.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing that you got to meet your hero also and have her on
It
your
was,
podcast.
it is
Epic.
still something that when she passed, I was really upset. I was really sad because we were texting before Biden won in 2021, and we were like on pins and needles. And I remember he won, and she sent me a text like, okay, things are good. I feel better now. And I was like, all right, like to have Judy Human send me that text was like, wow, that's really cool.
Oh my God.
And so I will forever miss her, but she was such a light in the world, and I'm excited to see who comes up after her.
I mean, it's literally you. It's you.
I mean,
You're doing it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, but definitely not. Definitely not.
Here's something we just don't talk about enough. Pain with sex is super common. Up to 3 out of 4 people with vulvas report pain during intercourse at some point in their lives. That's most of us. And yep, I personally have been there. There are lots of possible causes, and lube isn't a magic cure for everything, but I will say this. Using Uber Lube makes a huge difference for me. It's silicone-based, long-lasting, doesn't get sticky, and it's made with sensitive bodies in mind. It also doesn't stain my sheets or clothes, so it's one less thing to worry about. I literally keep multiple bottles all over my house and the Good To Go Traveler in my toiletry bag because running out is just not an option. If you're ready to bring more comfort and more pleasure into your sex life, go to uberlube.com and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 10% off. Looking for another podcast that shares smart, science-backed insights about our bodies? Check out Decoding Women's Health with Dr. Elizabeth Pointer, your new go-to podcast for modern, reliable health information for women in midlife and beyond. Each episode breaks down the latest research on women's health, hormones, and longevity science to empower you to live your healthiest, best life. You'll hear from expert guests on everything from metabolism and genetic risks to managing brain fog. Stick around at the end of this episode for a preview of the episode Decoding Cannabis with Dr. Stacey Ann Gruber. Dr. Pointer and Dr. Gruber explore the therapeutic potential of cannabis, how it works in the brain, and how it may be used to improve the symptoms of menopause and perimenopause. Subscribe to Decoding Women's Health on your favorite podcast app or find the link in our show notes. I want to know about your book. So you wrote a book recently, and it's called Notes from a Queer Cripple: How to Cultivate Queer Disabled Joy and Be Hot While Doing It. Tell me about this book. I want to know, like, in this book and in your work, how do disability and queerness intersect?
This book is really raw. This book is really sexy. It's also really serious. It talks about, like, it kind of walks the reader through what is ableism, how do I define ableism, and then how does ableism impact queer disabled folks, and then I go into like my dream idea for like clubs that were accessible, queer clubs that are accessible to everything from ramps to having attendant care there, to having guide dogs there, to having like all these things that queer spaces don't often think about. And then it goes into like all the times that I had sex that were funny or weird or strange. And it really, like, there's a point in the book where I talk about asking my caregiver to help me with a sex toy and like things that only a disabled person like me would experience. And I had some critiques from some random people that reviewed the book that were like, all he talks about is how to hire prostitutes and how to like and getting his sex worker to jack him off. And I was like, did you read the book? Because that's not.
I would screenshot those 1-star reviews and make them into a series and be like,
yeah,
fuck
right?
you.
And so I just, but I'm so proud of it. It's a small book from a small publisher out of the UK. And they approached me in 2022 and said, we love your tweets. Would you be willing to have a meeting with us? And I was like, you read my tweets? What? And so they like sat down with me and said, we want to showcase more queer disabled people in our writing. We do a lot of stuff for the trans community and the queer community. Would you want to write a kind of a book around sexuality and disability? And I'd already been thinking about wanting to do that, but I had wanted to be approached because I was like, I don't want to do it on my own. That's hard. I want somebody to approach me and say, we like your stuff, write for us. So when they finally did, I was like, sure, of course, like, yes, please. So they were so lovely, and I worked with an editor, and I remember writing the first chapter thinking, this is the shittiest thing I've ever written. No one's gonna want to publish this. And I wrote the first chapter and I sent it to my editor, and he said right away, he was like, this is why we chose you. This is why we asked you to write for us. This is going to be a great book.
Best.
And I'm so proud of it because it talks about sex and disability in a raw way that I don't think we have seen in stuff around disability. Like in so much disability activism, it's dry and boring, or it's like funny, but it doesn't talk about the fact that like that disabled person you see on TikTok probably likes to get eaten out, but they don't talk about that because that's not acceptable on these platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So my book, somebody reviewed the book and said it was like talking to your disabled queer bestie at 2 a.m. about all the things you want to know about sex. And I was like, that was my favorite review. I was like, all right, well, I've done it. Great. And so it's really, it was a way for me to explore those feelings that I had, put them down in like little essays for myself, and then also be like, oh yeah, I eat butt really well. Here's a whole paragraph on that. And just to show people that like, this is what sexuality and disability looks like.
Amazing. I mean, I have so many more follow-ups. I think like when did you like know you were queer? When did you start experimenting with your sexuality? Like what did that look like for you as someone with a disability?
I started I knew I was queer when I was like 6 years old, and I remember it vividly because for two reasons. One, I remember going to the pool and swimming with like probably an 18-year-old high schooler, and I was like 6, and I remember him holding me and me being like, this feels, I don't know what this is, but I like it. I'm not sure what this feeling is. I'm 6, I have no idea what's happening here. And I remember after our like last session, I told him that I loved him, which when you're 6 is adorable, but I meant I love you.
I'm in love with you.
Yeah, I'm 6 and I love you. And so he was obviously an 18-year-old kid who didn't understand, like obviously did the right thing. It was like, that's nice, go back to your parents now, bye. And like, great. But at that moment, something clicked to me that I was like, oh, this is different. And then the second time I realized was, do you remember, I don't know if you would know this, but that when I was a kid, there was the Robin Hood fox. Remember the cartoon?
Yeah.
I had a giant crush on the Robin Hood fox.
Classic.
When I was 6 or 7, and I didn't know why. I came to find out 30 years later he was queer the whole time. Which
queer lore for Robin Hood the fox.
Yeah, that explains everything. The guy who voiced the fox was queer.
Wow.
I was like, well, no wonder I was into this cartoon.
That's fascinating.
But I remember being really into this cartoon for reasons I couldn't understand. And so I knew from a young age, but I didn't know what it was. And I remember when I got into high school, 14, 15, thinking I had to be like straight because everybody around me was straight. And I was like, okay, I'm going to conform. I'm going to lie. So I remember having crushes on like Nev Campbell and like actively saying things like, I think Nev Campbell is so hot. Meanwhile, I just wanted to be her friend because she was so cool. Like that's And so I remember like having crushes on boys, and I remember being like 12 or 13 and learning how to masturbate and thinking about boys. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is what but I can't tell anybody because I'm disabled and that's not okay. And like, I already have one big strike against me. I don't want to put my family through this. And so when I was 15, 16, coming out, like when I was coming out, it was the late 90s, 1999. Queer as Folk was big. And I remember watching the original Queer as Folk, like not the British one, the American one, watching that show in secret, having my nanny at the time VHS tape that for me and watching it in secret and like watching. There's a scene in the first episode where the main character is like 17 and gets rimmed. And I was like, I want that. How do I do that?
I want to go to there.
Yeah, I want that. That is what I want that. And so, but in all the storylines you see, like, because it was the late 90s, early 2000s, like the kids still got kicked out. The parents were still super homophobic. And so I would see like, oh, the kid on my favorite show got kicked out and is on the street. And so I can't tell my parents I'm queer. They might kick me out. Now, of course, my mom is a giant hippie from the 70s. So she was, when I told her, I remember telling her, and I've told the story a few times, but I'll tell it again. I remember telling her every night she'd help me finish my dinner because I needed help to eat sometimes. And she'd help me finish my dinner. And I would talk to her while she cleaned up the kitchen. And so one night she was like, well, what's wrong with you? You haven't really talked a lot in the last 2 weeks. Are you gay or something? And I
She
went,
knew.
well, yeah, actually. And she went, oh, and so I remember she turned around from our big red sink, and I think I mentioned that in the book, our big red sink in our kitchen, and she said, oh, well, that's okay. And then I cried, and she said to me, well,
Oh.
her next question was, do you think Brad Pitt is hot? And I said, of course I think,
I
of
have
course. It's like
eyes.
late,
Yes.
it's late 90s. He's a beautiful man. Of course I do. I mean, now that we know he's a bit of a douchebag,
Right.
not so much, but back in then, sure, okay.
Yeah.
And so then she rented Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and said, if you want to be this kind of gay, yeah, that's fine. And at the time, I was like, oh no, I'm not like that kind of gay. And then, funnily enough, 3 years later, when I went off to college, I called her and said, hi, Mom, I'm in a bra and a dress right now. I'm going to the drag show. I just want to let you know. And so it's like, my family was very, very supportive, is very supportive of my queerness. But really, I didn't get to experiment on my own until I moved away, until I went to college and wasn't living in my parents' house and had the chance to kind of make bad decisions with no consequence, and nobody could tell me no because I was technically an adult, which looking back on that now, I was like, what the fuck was I thinking? But like, the first time I had sex, I met a guy in line, and I didn't know how to do hookups, so I would meet them online and say stuff like, hello, how are you today? Would you like to,
Good day,
and that,
governor.
yeah, and that's not like that isn't how you do like sexy hookups. So my roommate at the time pushed in my room and said, you're fucking doing it wrong. Give me the keyboard. And so he took the keyboard and he typed in, I want a blowjob. He goes, there, that should fix your problem. Somebody should respond soon. And of course, within like 20 seconds, the whole thing lit up. And so I invited a guy over and we had with sex, and I came really fast because I was 19 and that's what happens. And so I said to him, okay, well, you made me come. When are we going to go on our date? And he was like, what date? And I was like, well, you just made me come. So aren't we boyfriends now? Like what happens now?
Oh.
And he was like, oh, no. I just came by because I felt bad for you.
Oh.
You were a pity fuck. And I went, okay.
Oh, fuck that.
And so like 19-year-old me was like, well, this is gay sex. I don't want to do it. I don't want this again.
Ugh.
And so it's been, and I wish I could say that the majority of my sex after that was better, but a lot of queer men, I mean, it's a shame that I like men. It's a real shame that I'm into men because they are literally the worst. It's a real shame. Even after that, that was 20 some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I still deal with ableism from guys online who will say stuff like, oh, you're disabled. I don't know if I could deal with that. Or, oh, you have disabilities. I'm not sure if I could navigate that. And so that's why in the last probably 10 years, I've pivoted to working exclusively with sex workers, because I just find that simpler and easier. And I can build a relationship with them and while it's transactional, it can still be, I can show you my disability and I can explain to you what my needs are, and I can make sure that somebody who needs income is being paid, and I can make sure that people who need support are have their needs met. And so all that to say, like, I'm still experimenting with my sexuality. I'm 20 years on from that experience, and I still feel like I'm 22, 23 sometimes because I've never dated. I've never had anything quote unquote long term. So I still feel like I'm in the stage of like, oh, I'd love a boyfriend, but I don't know how that works. Like, how do you do that? What is that? And I also don't have the energy to deal with someone's ableism now. I'm too old, and I don't care
100%.
enough to entertain that. If you're going to be an ableist, like, get out of here.
Right.
I don't have time for that.
100%. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Wow, there was a lot of story there.
No, it's great. I have so many thoughts. I mean, first of all, you're so fucking funny and cool that like
Thank you.
I also just respect the way in which you described how your relationship is now with sex work and with sex workers. And I just think that the more that we are honest about the fact that sex workers provide such a valuable resource for
such a vital
every community, like it's wild.
I had a session with a sex worker the other day, and there was nothing penetrative about it. There was nothing like dirty or seedy. He came over at like 11 p.m., got naked. We made out a little bit, and then we talked about our lives. And then we fell asleep, and then at 4 a.m. we woke up and made out a little bit more, and we had a little bit more sex. But like, that was it. It was it's become less about like, I want to fuck you right now, and more of like,
Intimacy.
I want to feel some intimacy, and I want to have some like moments that aren't I don't need like, let's fuck right now and let's all the come. I don't care about that. Like, just touch my body and make me feel seen for a second, and that's great.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Good Bad Things?
I have seen. I was actually gifted the chance to watch that early before it went out to theaters. Danny Kurtzman and Steve Way, actually, we had a little chat before they sent me the film. They were like, they're like, there's nothing, we're not promoting it really. We just want the community to see it. Would you like a streamer copy? And I was like, yeah, send it immediately. So I watched it right away, and I loved it and the reason I loved it is because we never see disabled people like that on film. We've seen more and more disabled people, but again, he was severely disabled, that character, and that actor, in my view, is severely disabled. And I love seeing that because, like, that person who needs so much help also wants to get laid, also wants to feel touched, also wants to like fuck and be desirable. And like, that film, there were so many points in that film that I was like, yep, love it, yep, like,
relatable.
Great. Yeah. I fell in love with it, and I saw it a few months ago, and I was like, this is great. Yeah. More of this.
It's so good. And we actually had both Danny Kurtzman and Steve Way on the podcast talking about the film. And amazing, beautiful listener, if you haven't listened to that episode, we're going to link it in the show notes because it's so good. The movie's so fantastic. And I think that it's talking about people who are disabled, who have sex, have intimacy, have love, have crushes, want relationships. Like, the more and more we talk about this, the more and more normalized that disabled people experiencing those things becomes. And I think that, like, one thing that I also want to discuss here that is resonant with Good Bad Things is interabled relationships. I think there's this misconception that people with disabilities can only date and fuck people with other disabilities. Other people with disabilities. And I want to put that myth to bed, pun intended, because I think that folks who are in interabled relationships, it's probably just as, if not more common than only people who are disabled in relationships.
But I also think, you know, funny that you said put to bed. I also want to put to bed in like a fun, punny way. Yeah. Disabled people can also fuck each other too.
Right.
And that can be really hot. I made out with a bunch of disabled folks. Not a bunch, but one or two.
No, pop off a bunch.
in my time here. And like, you know, disabled people being with each other, it's important to see that too also. I think like that, because I think sometimes when we see interabled couples, and that's important too, of course. But like, the pressure of like, oh, you're taking care of him. Oh, like, there's so much pressure. And I think of Shane Burkaw, and I think of like Charisma and Cole and all like those big internet names that are doing all that. That's great, but I can't imagine for both of them the level of discomfort they have to have around people thinking that their loved one is their caregiver or their partner is their caregiver. And like, I think also seeing two severely disabled people fuck would be incredible.
100%.
I haven't seen that yet. I would love to be a part of that. And so any queer disabled men that are listening, hi, I'm available. What's up? No, but I just think like, I think that the myth that disabled people can only be together with each other, I understand why you were doing that, and I appreciate that. But I also want to say, like, yeah, they can be together, and guess what? That's okay too.
As well.
yeah.
No, I think that is a good call out. I mean, I think that you're right in that there isn't really any representation of two disabled people. And again, maybe it's because of this like fighting against the notion that only disabled people can date other disabled people. So I think maybe we've gone too far the other way.
Yeah. And I think for some of us with that, I have internalized ableism, a lot of it. And if you don't know what that is, internalized ableism is when you turn the ableist messages we hear in the world every day in on yourself. And so the idea of dating a non-disabled person is hot to a lot of us because like then you can say, look, I'm really disabled, but I bagged this hot person. Like, look at me, I did it, I made it. Yeah. But like it feels kind of weird to me to do that because like that's so much pressure on your partner. And that's what I love about sex work is that I'm not dating this person. I have no like fiduciary obligation to you. So I mean, well, I sort of do.
I was just going to say, isn't that the main
sort of do.
obligation that you have?
I sort of do. I will pay. I do. Look, let me rephrase that. I will pay you for your work and your time, of course. But what I mean is like, we're not bonded together in like
right. This like
any
long-term
sort of
capacity.
way.
It's like,
yeah. So like, I can say, come over and blow me for an hour and let's make out and let's watch a movie. Here's $250. Thanks so much. See you later. And there's something kind of nice about like, we're going to do that. You go back to your life. I'll go back to my life.
Yeah.
See you later.
It's so fascinating the way that you just framed that, right? Like we kind of have no problem shelling out like therapy for me, right? Costs like $125 a session, right? So if I'm thinking about like spending money in this way, if you go shopping, like that's costing money. You're going out for a concert, that's costing money. Like if we can reframe the way in which we are paying sex workers for their time and the way in which we experience the world as it's just another need that we are paying for.
Just another need. And like the government's never gonna fucking do this. But right. I know in Australia and I know in Denmark, they will give you a stipend so you can hire a worker to see you once a month to help you explore intimacy. And like the American government's never gonna fucking do that because they're too afraid of that. But like even though
they're
most
peddling
of
abstinence only sex education,
even though most of our heads of state have secretly used a worker, or like the president didn't he sleep with Stormy? So like what? Like why aren't we putting money towards giving disabled people and anyone that wants to hire a worker? The government should fucking pay for it. Why not? Why can't that be part of Medicaid? Why can't me coming once a week be a part of my Medicaid plan?
I'm putting that on a license plate, for God's sakes. Yeah. I'm putting that on a bumper sticker.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you do, send it to me, please.
Why can't me coming once a week be a part of Medicaid? For God's sakes.
Because so many of us can't. And the reason why I started working with workers was because I wasn't meeting guys the conventional way. I didn't want to go to bars and spend all this time and energy being rejected in person, which can sometimes be really way harder than being rejected online. You go to a place, you do all this work to get there, and then you get there and no one talks to you. And it's like, well why am I here? I would much rather be home. And so working with a worker, and not all of them have been great. I've had people steal money from me. I've had people like be kind of shitty too on that end too. So it's a lot of trial and error, and it's finding
it's like dating, right? It's like the same thing.
It's like finding folks that are okay. And the 2 or 3 that I work with on a regular basis, like they're lovely. I just texted one of them like an hour ago. It was like, hey, you're really hot. I hope you're well. Bye. Like,
just want to let you know. Gotta go. Bye. My mom's calling me.
Just want to remind you, you're super hot. Bye. Like, but I think like sex work and disability, and also like a lot of disabled folks can't work a 9-to-5 job. So a lot of disabled folks are sex workers because the whole idea of working a 9-to-5 is impossible. But if I can like make a dude come and get $300 to feed myself, great. Or to like survive, great. And I'm not saying that every disabled person does it for survival. Some of us do it because it's fun. Like I've done porn and it was fun and it was great. But like, I think this idea that, oh, the poor disabled person needs to hire a sex worker and it's so sad. It's like, no, there's a whole other side to it where disabled people need to make a bunch of money to survive in the hellscape we live in. And sex work is a great way to do that.
Correct. Yeah. Andrew, you're spitting facts. I don't know how else to say it.
I mean, it's just coming out of me today. I don't know.
It's just cumin out of you today. Back to the spice. I have loved chatting with you. I think this is just like so real, so authentic. I really appreciate you sharing your experience and especially talking about normalization of sex work. Again, like I think this is incredibly impactful. I think that the way in which you're talking about your disability, like I know that I have felt like very much like I feel more related to you, like inside of what goes on in your everyday life. And I'm sure people listening appreciate your candor. So thank you. And I want to build a sex toy team with you. I want to know what makes a great accessible sex toy. If there are a few toy options out there that you really like or have used that you feel like disabled people who are listening or people who have sex with disabled people listening want to know about.
Yeah, when we were creating our toy, I ran a sex toy company with my lovely sister Heather out of Australia. We ran a sex toy company called Bumpin', which is now RIP because COVID and costs and all the things didn't work. So we designed a toy called the Bumpin' Joystick, which was basically a sex toy holder that you could put your sex toy in, and if you didn't have dexterity, it's like a pillow. So the top half was like a pillow that you like a soft, cushy pillow, and the bottom half was a sex toy holder. So you put your favorite dildo or whatever toy you want to use in there, and then you'd hug it into yourself, and you'd basically be able to self pleasure. So we had that ready to go, and then just money and cost and the reality of trying to run a business. And she was in Australia, and I was here, and we were trying to do it, and we were like, "Oh fuck, this is way too hard." So we eventually just said, "Okay, we tried, like we did it." But when we were doing that, like we talked to disabled people on the ground and said, "What kind of toy do you want?" And some people said, "I don't have dexterity. I need a bigger toy." Like, and I was the chief disability officer of that, and so like I said, like, I have no dexterity and my hands are kind of shit. So I needed a bigger toy. And so my favorite toys are like the magic wand, like big girthy dildos, because they're big enough for me to hold and position the way that I want to. So I think if you're going to build a sex toy team, you need more than one disabled person. You need to talk to a bunch of them.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that, like, one of the things that we didn't focus on, because our main focus was dexterity and like hand issues, but I think about, how do sex toys work for blind folks? How do sex toys work for people with sensory issues? How do sex toys work for, people with autism? Like, there are so many avenues you could go down, and I think that the more sex toy teams hire disabled people to be like, we want to pay you for your expertise, and we want to like show it. One of the things that I got to do when we were doing our toy, when we were testing, was they would send me buckets of sex toys and be like, try to jerk off with this, how did it feel? Go.
Fuck yeah.
And I would write back to them what I thought, and then they would send me another bucket a month later. And like, it was so cool to be a part of that. But
Just picturing a bucket being delivered in the mail.
Yeah, like a bucket of dildos, basically, is what it was. But it was such a cool thing to do, and we need more disabled people like that. And in those conversations, to make a real toy that has impact.
Hell yeah. Would love your links. We're gonna put them in the show notes of this episode. So I'll be reaching back out to you for some of your recs. And totally heard. I think that's a great idea. We're gonna maybe do like an IG story series asking our followers who are disabled to share their toy recs. So maybe we can put together a big list.
Oh yeah, cool. I'd love that.
Yeah. Andrew, you're so fantastic. I have loved getting to know you. Where can people find your book and follow you on the interwebs?
Yeah, they can find my book at anywhere you get books. I just found out that it's going to be an audiobook eventually. I've not even started recording that, but eventually
Hell yes.
an audiobook will be there. So at some point, you'll hear my dulcet tones reading you about how I like to fuck dudes with the ass, and they come really hard. Eventually. And they can find that wherever they get books. Amazon's a big seller. Independent bookstores are great. They sometimes have them. I would recommend, not that I want to recommend Jeff Bezos' company, but if you want to get it fast, you can go there.
Yeah.
I still get a portion of the proceeds, so wherever you get it, I still get paid somehow. So get it there. You can find me on the interwebs at andrewgurza.com. I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram, just my name, and those are the main places where I go.
Yes. Andrew, thank you so much for being here today. This was so great.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Welcome to the Afterglow, where we wind things down, reflect on some big takeaways, and leave you with one juicy thing to try, think about, or explore before next week. This conversation with Andrew was amazing and went in such fascinating directions that I truly couldn't have predicted. It was so delightful how this episode unfolded. And this season, as you know, is all about pleasure. But Andrew is so right to bring up disappearing life-saving services like SNAP. And we all know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Disabled people are being trapped at the bottom fifth of that pyramid, which contain physiological needs like food and shelter. How are we supposed to focus on pleasure when we don't know if we'll be able to afford dinner or rent or medical bills? The fight for sex ed is inextricably tied to the fight for bodily autonomy, and so is the fight for disability rights. These struggles are all intertwined, and like Andrew said, the government is fucking us right now, and they are not using lube. And one way the government could be fucking us all less is if they let us hire people to actually fuck us. It is no wonder that Andrew and so many other people rely on sex workers. Pleasure, intimacy, and sex are needs. Everyone should have access to them, and they should be treated like needs too. And in case you're somehow here at the end of this episode and you still need to hear this, yes, sex work is work, obviously. It's so important that we think about sex work and pleasure and intimacy as essential needs and ensure that we're doing what we can to fight for everyone to have access to those needs. So here's your pleasure practice of the week. Go to your favorite social media platform of choice and just search #disability, like Andrew said. What comes up on your feed? What kind of content is your algorithm immediately feeding you? Then start really engaging with the content that you see. Follow at least one person who teaches you at least one new thing, even if you yourself are disabled. Try looking into folks who have different kinds of disabilities than you and learn from them too. If you have an invisible disability, try seeking out people with visible physical disabilities, like using a wheelchair. And if you have a physical disability, try following someone who's advocating for autism rights right now. If our struggles are tied together, we have to know how to show up for each other, and there are countless completely different ways to do that. There are also countless completely different ways to be disabled. And if you've learned anything from this episode, please take this away. Disabled people deserve pleasure. They deserve sex. They deserve intimacy. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so excited to chat with y'all next week. Love y'all. Talk to you soon.
So if a woman wants to explore using cannabis to help her health and well-being, what are some guidelines for her? What should she be aware of? What should she ask if she goes into a dispensary? What kind of questions? What should she look out for?
I would say the overarching things to be mindful of, like what are the top things you say to people? Start low and go slow is an obvious one. Here's the thing that people don't know about cannabinoids necessarily. You can always add, you can never take away. Never. Once it's in, it's in. You can't really throw it up or poop it out. Like, it doesn't work that way. It's in, okay? And so what we want to be mindful of is the route of administration and knowing that you can always add to what you've taken. So it's better to err on the side of less rather than more. Until you know how you're going to respond to different products, and they are different. A gummy created for sleep versus pain versus anything else, even by the same company, may very well affect you very differently because the constituent profile is different. What works for your best friend, your husband, your girlfriend, may not work for you. That's the other thing to be mindful of. Be mindful of the, here, just try this phenomenon. I had one patient who said her husband said, oh, this is exactly what you need right now. And he gave her something that was the equivalent of about 50 milligrams of THC. Well, it didn't end well. Low doses of THC are generally considered, for many people, anxiolytic. That is, they can help reduce anxiety. For the majority of individuals, and in fact at certain levels everyone, THC can be anxiogenic. That is, it can create or worsen anxiety. So you have to be very, very careful. And to me, a quote, small dose is not what other people's small dose is. 5 milligrams is not a small dose. That's a full dose. Governor Hickenlooper in Colorado back in the day, 2012, proposed 10 milligrams of THC per quote serving. That was dropped by Nora Volkoff, the director of NIDA, the National Institutes on Drug Abuse. So what's a small dose? In my world, less than 1 milligram. And people laugh. They go, oh, come on, you can't get anything. No, I can get activity at a receptor, which is what I'm looking for.
And then you have to be careful, like if your gummy is at 10 milligrams or 5 milligrams and you cut it up, you have to make sure it's a homogeneous gummy, right? Because some of them are not so homogeneous.
Edibles are the most challenging products in terms of dosing, in terms of making sure that, if it's a batch of brownies that a well-intended manufacturer has created, Does the brownie on the bottom left have exactly the same profile as the brownie on the bottom right? I don't know. And it depends. Did you tip the pan? All these things matter. And so, not to scare anybody, but again, start with something small, smaller than small. Start with a quarter of what you think you should have and then add. Don't go the other way, because unfortunately I get the calls in the middle of the night where people are in the emergency room, and that's decidedly unpleasant and should be avoided.
So start low and go slow. And what's right for your friend is not right for you, and you've got to figure it out.